these are the issues. Have Kenyans also demanding that Ruto must go. Yeah. So who is presiding over the parliament, both chambers, to impeach? Whose interests are they serving? Because if they are the people's interests, they would also impeach who? The president, because the people have been demanding for his resignation as well. First, because of the cost of living and the finance bill, then later because of how those protests were handled, the people that were killed, the people that are still missing. Recently, many of the activists were arrested as they went to take to the president's office a list of missing people. So it's politics. It's unfortunate that when Kenya was voting the other day, and when we saw the guard move from the side of Uhuru to the side of Ruto, we felt envious. We wish. How can we be so close in geography, but be so far?
The government stroke opposition.
But be so far in terms of things that are happening. But the spiraling, the rate at which Kenya is becoming Uganda is scary.
Honorable Ssemujju, let's go to the politics of things. So how will this end?
Hasn't it ended?
Oh, it has ended.
But the deputy president said he will contest the next election.
Yes. If he's impeached, he can. If he's impeached and fought, he can.
In Kenya, it's okay. Even if he doesn't contest, he has indicated that he will oppose Ruto, either as a candidate or he will support someone else. The politics of Kenya is completely different from the politics of Uganda. And the formation of political parties will tell you that, Oscar. Almost every election in Kenya, especially towards the end of Moi, every election has had new political formation. And in Kenya, it is normal for people to move from one group to another, from people to camp and the camp. Because I remember it must have been Honorable Lydia who told us how Ruto was banging the table when they announced when they were announcing Kibaki, and he was with Raila Odinga.
We were at the Tally Center when they were
the one who went to stop the counting of votes on behalf of Raila Odinga.
Yes.
These were Tengula. In the last election, they were with Raila Odinga. Now they are with Ruto. So the Kenyan politics is very difficult to understand.
See, Brian,
it's about interests.
Political parties in Kenya are SPVs, special purpose vehicles for that election.
Yeah, but
after that, the changes. Yeah.
They make the politicians in Kenya look extremely opportunistic. That in the morning you are with Ruto, in the evening with Raila Odinga, because you see the problem here of Ruto and Raila Odinga. Ruto begins his presidency by asking Raila Odinga to respectfully be an opposition leader with his group. He said this business of working with the government when you're opposition that happened under Kenyatta of handshake will not happen. And he repeats that. What Raila Odinga does is to get the Kenyan to protest against subsidies, and I don't know whether it was something else. And they closed in Nairobi for some time. Then they started tear gassing Raila Odinga and his group. But I think along the way, who realized that he's going to have a very difficult presidency. Either you reenact the Moi period of arresting people and beating them, and then he goes back to what Uhuru Kenyatta did. That it is cheaper to actually work with them than be on the street every day tear gassing them.
No, but his deputy had also now gone behind him also.
So the outcome of this is the stand that Raila Odinga took during the protests. Because first of all, the negotiation had been completed. Uhuru is with Raila Odinga asking for the job of Africa. They are in Kampala, they are everywhere. And Raila Odinga is issuing statements during the protests telling protesters not to ban Kenya. This is unacceptable. This is hooliganism. This is this and that. In the end, I think the space of the deputy president was taken. He had no operating space, and because he had no operating space, he also opportunistically started supporting protesters. Because if he had his operating space, which Raila Odinga was now seeking to take over, I don't think he was going to say the things that he said when people were protesting. But because these fellows don't care about each other, so they care about their next move, he said, okay, Wamaraida, come, we chase man and we work together. I actually don't know, because I saw the Kalonzo Musyokas now criticizing Raila Odinga. So maybe the next coalition will be the Musyoka and Gachagua and others. I think now, Kenya, I like some aspect of their politics, but politicians behaving like that, I don't admire it. That in the morning, you get elected together as a group. Less than a year, you are now plotting the downfall of your own group.
Oscar, one thing before Joseph comes in, and remember I posted it on our group. Just, during the protest, the whole of Western Kenya was a no-go area for government.
Meaning the first protest of Raila Odinga.
Even the recent one. Even the second one. Immediately, Raila struck with Ruto. Ruto goes to visit Nyanza and is a hero. A hero. Thousands and thousands in Kisumu everywhere. They're on the streets receiving William. And you can't imagine that these are the very guys who were Ruto. Now they are saying Ruto our hero, Ruto our hero. So, even this thing about Gen Z, you let the Gen Z now ask for another riot. Okay. And you see whether they will get the foot soldiers, because the foot soldiers were actually rider people.
Joseph,
I have told this problem that at the beginning of my understanding practical politics outside the boundaries of this country, I spent some time in Kenya. And that is the early 80s when
the EPC government was brutal.
Pardon?
No, I'm asking him where that is the reason that the EPC government became as brutal as Moi.
Ibrahim is about to spoil our money.
No, I'm just asking.
But first continue.
He said he went to Kenya to run.
That is why you're failing to learn from Kenya. Because I've actually said Kenyans actually learned. And it's a very important point. In early 80s, when political parties were banned in Kenya, we had a thriving multi-party democracy here post Idi Amin. And as a young student away from Abdu's school in Mwiri, I was having my holidays and I couldn't believe that Kenyans could accept to live in an environment, more-like environment in which political parties were banned. How swiftly Kenya has moved since then to where we are today tells me that away from actually the politics of interests and personalities, which is actually massively amazing, that we might actually criticize it, but maybe actually long-term might be something that we might need to learn from, where you're possibly disagreeing fundamentally today, but tomorrow you can actually sit down and have an open conversation. All I'm interested in is pushing that from
political inflation,
pushing that from personal interest to national interest. And I really hope that political parties, maybe in Kenya, would, and I've told some of the senior leaders in Kenyan politics, that they need to translate their political parties to genuine political parties, so that a political party is built on the values around. It may not happen, but I'm making the point that you have a political party like UPC and you know its values, and you have a political party like FDC, if they have values, you know what they stand for, and you run with it like that, and then you engage on major issues. And so, for me, the biggest test really has been the institutional element in Kenya, notwithstanding all the contradictions. That the court, I think, as Lydia and others have said, that a Kenyan court has had the courage to bar to stop an election. A Kenyan court has now, in many cases, decided to do the kind of thing that courts in Uganda wouldn't do, and Kenyan parliaments have gone on to impeach a leader. I think what is here is the test that the courts, as interpreters of the law, Kenyan courts are able to do what they're supposed to do. That parliaments, also can go and do what they have to do, rather independently, push in their interest, but independently, without necessarily bothering what State House or others will be doing. What is interesting to me, though, is that we saw this happening. The swift manner in which Rigathi, from the election as a running mate of Ruto, it was extraordinary that this is the guy 2 years later who would be associated with Gen Z. It was quite clearly a strategic interest protest, for which obviously it has sort of partly backfired. For me, I think what is important is the fact that the more recent things, I'm not necessarily sure that it's really very much about trying to push to manage time. If it is the case that they've decided that there is national consensus, and I think generally there's a national consensus that Rigathi must go for the political powers that be both in the judiciary and in the political systems, there's no reason why they should necessarily have waited for 2-3 weeks and left a vacuum in which maybe the Gen Zs and others might come in. So I think to me it's much more of reading efficiency rather than political expediency. I just wish half of what has happened in Kenya in the last 10 years could happen in Uganda.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll stop for a quick break.
And Rhythm Selector. Buy your tickets now. Ordinary at 5K using FlexiPay and 10K at the Get, 30K VIP and a Temporal 5 at 500K.
Exclusive ticket.
Beds and Bliss is sponsored by Bell Lager, Pepsi, Standing Bank FlexiPay, Acacia Hotels, Speak Events, Barara Corporate League Club, and Howard.
Capital FM. Fresh hits for Uganda.
We are not your everyday babies. Blazing trails, not going hazy. Breaking stereotypes, mainly. Main character energy, daily. From sunrise to sunset, we never tire. Fueled by passion and an inner fire. Finding freedom in the rules we break. Mountain Dew in hand, we stand on business every day. Mountain Dew, do the dew.
1 + 1 is 2.
And 2 is better than 1.
But do you want to know what's better than 2? Is the new Royco 2-in-1. Royco 2-in-1, it's a fusion that's superior. Royco 2-in-1 will make your food tastier. Royco 2-in-1, Kanzali and the juice, because 2 is better than 1.
With Kanzali plus Majuzi, you get the perfect pot of flavor and taste with the superior ingredients of the new Royco 2-in-1 mix. Enjoy the Kathufu mix. 2 is better than 1.
The biggest event of the year is here. The Capital FM Big Wedding Season 8. At Capital FM, we're giving you yet again an all expenses paid dream wedding. You too can win this magical and unforgettable wedding of the year. The top 10 couples will be selected and read on Capital FM, and listeners will vote for top 5 and winner of the Big Wedding Season 8. Sponsored by Speak Resort Munyonyo, Rowenzioni Wedding and Events, Bailey's, Bell Citrus, Kansani Plascon Paint, Photogenic Spaz Events, Stress Free Events, Rwanda Air, Travel Neza.
Howard.
Capital FM. Fresh hits for Uganda. The Capital Gang on 91.3 Capital FM.
Welcome back from the break, a noisy break it was. This is the Capital Gang getting into the last part. I beg your pardon? Honorable Semuju, what happened to NUP prisoners for having changed their minds and pleaded guilty?
I don't think they changed their mind. As a journalist, I covered the arrest of now Katikiro of Buganda, Charles Peter Maiga, together with Honorable Segona Nambozi. They were accused of recruiting rebels, procurement of arms to remove government. Eventually, what was supposed to be a matter of police and DPP and court became a matter of Museveni, his cabinet, and the Katikiro then of Uganda, Engineer Warusimbi. In one of the meetings, at Serena, Dr. Ruhakana Rugunda, if I'm not mistaken, he was Minister for Internal Affairs. He came with a draft of a document that he was supposed to sign, he Rugunda and his team on behalf of government, and Engineer J.B. Warusimbi on behalf of Uganda government. And one of the clauses in that agreement, in that document, was that the Katikiro will go and speak to Maega and Namboze and Medad to abandon the rebellion whose aim was to remove. So they were making the Katikiro almost to make a self-confession that his Minister for Information, Segona, was a deputy and Namboze was heading a committee, that they are involved in subversive activities. I will go and speak to them, and they stop. And because I am also Nkobazambogo, an activist, we protested. I had a bitter exchange with Katikiro for not seeing that they were making him confess that people had been picked for. So government does this, Oscar. I am only giving an illustration. Sometimes they do it because they are holding on to people for a very long time and they want to abandon them. But they will want victory even as they do this. So one way of registering a victory on part of government, because they don't want to appear like they are arresting these people for no reason. You make them confess, and then you release them. Then you will not accuse government of rounding up people, of disappearing people, subjecting them to military court, and so on and so forth. Sometimes it is the intention, but sometimes they genuinely want to hold on to you, and the only way they can release you is by you confessing. Because for these people were picked in November 2020. May 2021.
Wow.
Nearly 3.5 years later. And they are appearing before a military court. Even a military court cannot hear the case and sentence them if they have committed the crime. Because a military court is not different from an executive order. They will issue written. But the fact that they haven't tried them and convicted them tells you that actually they have no evidence to present against them. But they are not easy. Staying in prison is a very difficult thing. Alan Sewanyana and Seginya went to see them. And I think at one time Alan Sewanyana was suffering from a very serious depression. They had started bathing him like a kid. He couldn't even know where the facilities were. So once they subject you to that torture, mental, you don't know if you'll ever come out of prison. And then they make an offer to you that, okay, you confess, then we release you. So I think that's what these people have found, that there is no chance that we'll get out. Because the Kabazuguruka case, the Honorable Kabazuguruka, former MP Nakawa, was being tried that he wanted to kill Mr. Museveni. And then he went to court, and the court said, the constitutional court, that you cannot try civilians in a military court. All these fellows are civilians. And they are saying they found them with the bombs. The same accusation they made against the Honorable Kyagulanyi in Arua, that they found him with a gun. Segona was even more interesting. When they took him to Bundubujo, where he was supposed to have been recruiting rebels from, first he can't speak the language there. Then they brought some of pharaohs for a parade identification, and they said that's the guy who was recruiting us. And he told him, first, I have never been to Bundubujo, but I don't even speak and understand their language. So, in which language was I recruiting them? But you can't communicate. So Museveni does these things. I don't know whether he wants to make a step backwards and have a way of releasing and concluding this story, or maybe some people in his government are helping him to do that. But otherwise, people shouldn't. They never committed this crime. When I walked to work in 2011, I was picked in Banda, and the charge by an investigating officer who, by the way, comes from Ruengo. He had put terrorism. He found me working with a bottle of mineral water, arrested me, and then I go to Nakawa, and the charge in the morning was terrorism. Along the way, it changed it to disobeying lawful order and public nuisance. No, they were both. But the guy had said I had committed terrorism. And if the DPP wanted me to continue, because the intention is to keep you in jail. So I sympathize with them, but I understand why at some stage they can break you down, and then you say, okay, I committed the crime.
You agree with Honorable Ssemujju, Agatha?
Yeah, to the extent that I do not blame them, which is the mistake many people make when we are condemning this. You're coercing people, keeping them in jail for 4 years until they admit crimes they didn't commit. So people would say, oh, you guys wanted them to remain in jail. Some were accusing NUP and some of us, the activists that have followed this case, for eating from it. We wanted them to remain in jail because we were eating from it. And even so, people I once thought were sensible people and lawyers saying something like that. And for us, I wasn't actually saying that Olivia shouldn't have. I have interacted with Olivia so many times.
Who is Olivia? One of the prisoners?
Olivia Altaya. She's the only lady of the 32. And I have seen her cry that she hasn't seen her children. I have seen her cry that she wants her auntie to bring her 7-year-old son to prison. And I've seen her cry hearing the toll it takes on her son and say, kati mumureke bambi ngena muraba wendi viramu. So I cannot blame her. I have seen her say, but why do they even bother us? Why do they take us to the court martial when nothing is going to happen for 4 years? And maybe not 4 yet, but when they, if I count how many times they've gone to jail in like the 40 months, it must be more than 40 times, because sometimes they call them every month. Sometimes they come, the court is not sitting. Sometimes their relatives come, because the military will know when the court is not sitting, so they are not bringing them. No one has informed their relatives. They come. These are relatives that are not even allowed in the court, in whatever. It's not a court per se, because that Kabaziguruka case that Honorable Ssemujju alluded to did not just say do not try civilians. Said this is a what? A tribunal to discipline, not a court. At the end of the day, I don't even think that their change of plea is what's the word? Is illegal. Like, it's void. You already you are in a court that is illegal. So us who are worried about the consequences, the implications of that, a criminal record has consequences, because you are going to have problems looking for jobs. You're going to have stigma, because you actually admitting that you committed treasonous acts like that, like an offense that would ordinarily attract a death sentence. So maybe we shouldn't even worry, because there's a judgment that says this is not even a court in the first place.
Just say null and void.
Yeah, it's null and void. But the problem is, Oscar, that and that's where when I see what Semakade is taking the Attorney General through, I don't feel so bad for him. He appealed this decision of Kabazigurka and didn't just stop there. Yet he knows that's wrong. As a lawyer, a senior lawyer, as Honorable Katuntu likes us to add. And after that, he even applied for a stay of execution. So you have a judgment that should be saying these people shouldn't be tried. So they should have gotten out of that place to be tried in civilian courts. But you have an Attorney General that says stay of execution. You are asking yourself, what would the state have lost if they had brought them out of the military court and they wait for the Supreme Court decision, which will also not come anytime soon. They finished everything, submissions in 2021, have waited for a judgment for 3 years. And recently, do you know what they called them for scheduling? Like, the case they have been waiting for judgment, but the judges forgot. Okay, these judges, we need to identify them, that it is the Chief Justice Owinidoro who presides over that court, forgot that and called them back for scheduling. And the lawyers got there, but we finished everything. We've been waiting for judgment. Well,
some of the justices who were in the panel had since then
left. But this is a record of court, Honorable. Like, how can they not?
Before decision, you need to reconstitute the full panel. So they adopt other judges, and then formally they inform that just X and X, one retired, one died, so these two have replaced. But that say it can't be a reason at all to have such an important decision. Take
years.
this time.
Take
It
years.
is inexcusable.
But also, if you could help us with a stay of execution, is supposed to be about balance of convenience and all. Like, how on earth do you say that I would rather leave people rotting in jail as I wait for the 10 years that it will take to hear the Court of Appeal than have them out? And you do, and banging the tables, by the way. And on that case, I don't know why Semakade hasn't banged the tables yet. I will now cheer him on that one. Because
excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Joseph. Sorry, Derek first, then on to Joseph. So, which minister persuaded them to plead guilty?
Honorable. Sorry.
I'm not honorable. Go for Oscar.
I was going to mention the honorable's name first, but Oscar, I as a journalist have followed this case from the first person who was picked in November 2020. From the first person when the picking and abduction and those arrests started. I documented most of the cases in the Daily Monitor. There were over 1,300 and so people who were picked on the streets of Kampala. And just to bring you to speed, these 32 were picked in May 2021. Actually, all of them were picked from the court-martial. Yes, all of them were picked from the court-martial. Around that time was when the Eddie Mutwez, the Nubian Liz, who had been picked in Kalangala on the 31st of December 2020.
Were those the ones that had one bullet?
Yes, they had 4 bullets. By the way, on that day, I was one of those who was also arrested as a journalist covering the trail, but I was released hours later. So,
did they have the bullets?
We don't know. The state is supposed to tell us whether they did, it's actually true.
It has failed to tell us that for 4 years.
Now the other people.
The state has failed to adduce that evidence for 4 years.
Yes, the other people who were picked in Kalangala were accused of having 4 bullets. They were exchanging them. They were 36 in number. They were exchanging them from one person.
This is the accusation.
Yeah, that was the accusation.
Okay.
Now these 32 were accused of having 1 magazine.
Right.
And they were also exchanging from hand to another and stuff like that. And for 4 years, that magazine has never surfaced. We've never seen it. It has never been brought to court.
But Derek, that's a different case. So that was a case of the
Eddie Mutwez.
Yeah.
Yes. Now,
where they were producing evidence of finding this magazine you're talking about in the home of one person, but they are using it to charge.
Yes, they were exchanging. You go keep it in your house.
Yeah.
Now tomorrow you also Abdul Katun to go keep it in your house. Now, sorry.
South of I don't want to do things.
So that has been the chronological flow of events, and I saw depressingly and surprisingly that a honorable minister goes on air and says, I have been trying to help these people come out of court. Come out of prison. And that's the Honorable Minister for the Youth, newly appointed Balaam Balgahara. And I said, on such a day, the senior lawyers like the Honorable Abdul Katuntu should come and ask the Honorable Minister why he is interfering with a court matter.
What did he say?
He said, for me, I have been helping them. I have been talking to them. They plead. They come out of court, and President gives them a presidential pardon or something like that. This is a criminal matter, for a matter of fact. Let the court process go on uninterrupted. And the Honorable Minister is saying, for me, I can give them justice. Is it court that gives justice, or the minister gives justice? It's been, for me, I found that abhorrently absurd, and it makes me question so much.
What should he have said? What should he have agitated for?
I would have agitated that these people are produced in court. Yeah. They are
so
tried.
That's what the minister should have been saying.
Yes, that they are produced
process.
Speedy process. For the whole 4 years that have been there, no evidence against them, no trial. They are brought to court, like Agatha has said, and Agatha has been following these people. I've written stories about these people.
I have interviews of every parent. Of these guys.
I have written
every
all these
wife.
stories. You get, it's very sad. Now they are saying that after they have pleaded guilty, we don't know whether there's going to be a presidential pardon, because a presidential pardon is a prerequisite of the president, and he can choose when to say it, to give it. You get? So they might spend another 4 years in prison before the president gives them that presidential pardon. But also, when you plead guilty, the lawyers here, the Honorable Katuntu and Agatha, can tell us, when you plead guilty, court sentences you.
Wow.
They might give them a life sentence, because they have pleaded guilty to treason. You get? So everything that Honorable Balaam is trying to convince the world is out of this world. They are not using their senses when they are reasoning some of these matters.
Joseph.
This is a very, very sad. We've been discussing Kenya, and we've been discussing the reforms, the essential reforms in the law society. And the confirmation quite clearly, based on the submissions, is that it's really the state on trial. And I think that should really be our focus. I find it extraordinary, and I'll just respond to that earlier Ibrahim may have been joking about a UPC of the 80s. I'll put it in context. There is no circumstance, and the two journalists here, that this very particular element of gross violations of human rights would have happened anywhere between 1981 and 85, when UPC was last in government. And yet at the time, Mr. Museveni and his team were in the bush in Luweero, fighting against a democratically elected government, and they were also here in Kampala throwing bombs. Meaning the 32 alone is one of the biggest misfortunes. In any case, the question of the minister is quite clearly a minister of state, quite clearly perverting very actively the course of justice, as it were. It's a clear contradiction. And what happens if you see versus what's happening in Kenya? For us, we are discussing it, and beyond our discussions, almost as if it's business as usual. I think I have argued again and again and again that not only should these people have been released a long time ago, but I think that the court the state should be held to account.
Yeah.
In any case, case, one of the things that's required is that we hope there are senior lawyers listening, and the senior lawyers watching, and the senior lawyers in this room, in the studios, join hands with other very considered senior citizens of this country to take this regime to court for basically abusing the very basic and fundamental rights of the citizens. People who've been abused, people who've been tortured, and people who've lost families for reasons that the state, after 4 years, cannot adduce evidence against them. It's the state on trial.
Lydia.
The whole unfolding is like maybe a test on the rule of law, and it's a very serious matter. Now, for Balaam, I think it's also part of the politics, but also to show that he's doing his work because most of these people are young people. These are youth. So for him, he was like, whether you are in prison or not prison, I'm a minister for the youth. But he's doing his... I don't think it's fair to even discuss what Balaam's role is, but because you'd be expecting something what he is. That's Balaam. That is him, and I think to expect him to do outside what he's doing, I think you want to redefine his character and also what he is. So you leave him.
He making himself as the one who tells the courts what to do.
But that's what he is, and therefore we should focus more why courts should allow a Chivulu to even meddle in its space. Or if it's not a court, I mean, where have these people been since 2020 or 2020? Where they've been? And for someone who has been in a place that is not maybe defined in courts of law, like you are saying, and they have families, they have young children, I think you've been pushed to the wall. You've been pushed to the wall. It's as good as being denied the food, and then anything that can make you breathe or live, you can eat. Then you say, why did you eat this? But you are having your last breath. I don't know whether the people that had taken over fighting for these people's space should have done it. I remember I think in the CA, I don't know whether it's happening in the 11th Parliament, there are things that are supposed to be good. Good is good and wrong is wrong. So we used to have people, let me give an example of people like Ben Wacha and the late Sidi Ogwal, who were known to be opposition people, but they had very good national patriotic ideas. But because what was coming from them, it was likely not to be taken on. They used to go look for the Wanyotos of that time who seemed to be aligned to the system. And then what is good passes for the country. I don't know whether Katuntu you are getting my point. Therefore,
even one time Agadi told me.
Agadi.
Yeah, he died later.
Yes.
He said, we're up in the canteen, we were going for an afternoon debate. Then during lunch, we were discussing over something. They said, that's a good point, but don't say it. Let me go and say it.
Yeah.
Please,
so my story is coming
we are
that
going to lose it.
if these young people
exactly what happened.
were genuinely being arrested for the misdeeds or misdeeds they had, maybe they should have been clever and had people to remove them who are not political chest thumpers. Maybe they would have received they should have received their freedom earlier.
Yes.
That is my own take on that.
Abdul, you may have to conclude this.
Of course, everybody knows that just delayed is just denied. Can any reasonable person walking on the streets of Kampala say these people have gotten justice?
No.
I mean, there are things, and I remember saying it on the floor, that we are not having an academic debate. We are talking about real life and real individuals. People with families, people with families, people with children, and people with real homes. Some of them breadwinners, and they are locked out, and
All of them were
everybody walks and he says, well, he's a judicial officer, because I want to imagine that even at the army, people presiding over judicial officers, if I may put judicial officers in courts, you walk every day, you leave your home that I'm going to do the job, and instead you become an agent of injustice. It's painful to anybody, it's painful. And the issue which I have taken with the judiciary, the Orthodox judiciary, they should sort out this matter once and for all, and yesterday, not even today. Whether the court martial has got powers and jurisdiction to handle civilian matters. That thing should be sorted out, because we cannot have this every time we're on radios, televisions, on the streets. No, it has been resolved at the Constitutional Court level, but the Attorney General appealed to the the Constitutional Court of Appeal, which is the Supreme Court.
So that's pending.
So that's pending.
For 4 years.
Yeah, and I think Chief Justice Alfonso Winyidolo should be able to sort this thing out, surely, such that that chapter is closed. But let me conclude like this, Oscar, about the pleas and so on. In 1971, the UPC government was overthrown by Idi Amin. My father was a senior officer of the of the General Service Unit, and all of them were required to report to the police stations around Kampala. They used to report for a week. They would report and get them released. Then after 5 days, when they all came, were like rounded up and taken Luzira for like 3 weeks. Just lodgers in Luzira. After that, they were actually the number was 660. Afterwards, they were all rounded up and they were incarcerated in Mutukula, all of them. That included even the then director of CID, the late Hassan, who was a Ugandan or Pakistani origin, and most of the senior officers. Within 9 months, they had killed 500 something. Within just 9 months, massacred. So, around 29th of February, the following year, that day they killed 18, and they remained 44. When they killed 18, then Deutsche Welle, which was the voice of Germany, picked it, and it went all over the world that Idi Amin had massacred literally all the general service officers, including the senior CID officers. That's I think when they had just killed Hassan and so on. So the then Minister of Internal Affairs, I think was called Lieutenant Colonel Bitregama, was faced with a crisis.
Yes, I don't want to interrupt, but we are running
let me find
out of time.
So he came and they had a meeting, said, how do we handle this internet? So that's when they asked for that how many are still surviving. They said only 44. I said, now what we do, we release them. So they called the 44 to Kampala, and including, of course, my father. The only two were surviving. Professor Kwesiga Oyuri and another gentleman called Rujojo is Muchiga, I think, somewhere, of all the 44. So they called them and said, we are going to give you freedom, but we are going to call the press and said that the rest of these guys, your colleagues, had escaped to Tanzania. You know, Mutukula is the border of Tanzania. Or those who died as a result of them being apprehended. But for us, we stayed in the cells. Yes, so they called the international press, and that's what they were told. Confess you stayed in the cells, and those who have died, that is how the 44 got their freedom. So this thing is real. If you are in those circumstances, you will say anything for your freedom.
Well, Thank you for that narration, very touching. Thank you, listeners of the Capital Gang. Thank you, panelists we had today, starting with the one who came to bang tables, Mary Goretti Nakamiase Nyange, who spoke on legal merits and impact of executive order. And she says it is working. Thank you, Honorable Lydia Wanyoto Mutende, Honorable Abdul Katuntu. Thank you, Joseph Optimist UPC.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Semuju, who has already left the studio. Thank you, Agatha Atuhaire, and for keeping on fighting for these people. Thank you, Derek Wandera. I am Oscar Semoyamsoke, and I shall see you next week.
Thank you.
So those guys.